Welcome to the Catholic Table Talk podcast. This is where everything Catholic is on the table. New episodes Thursdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on most podcast platforms. Here's your host, William Sauber.
And I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you may be listening to this. YouTube, Facebook, all the platforms. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. It really does help us reach more people and spread the word about the Catholic faith like we meant to do when we started to bring you this podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about who came up, what was the story behind Jesus, I surrender myself to you, that being, what happened to it, who came up with it. You heard of it before, especially, I'm not doing a promotion here by any means. If they want to send some money, that I'd be happy to welcome it. But for hello, Jesus, I surrender myself to you, take care of everything. A lot of people fell in love with that prayer. A lot of people, hopefully you do, say the prayer daily now. But what's the story behind it? Who came up with it? How was it Jesus or Mary behind it? Was it who was it behind it? So we're going to talk a little bit about that, about a book today. So it'll be in the books to get segment playlist, I should say. So make sure you take a look at that. Here's the book. If you're watching this, Jesus, I surrender myself to you. The life of Don Dolindo Ruotolo. I know I'm mispronouncing his name wrong already, but we're going to talk about this book. And who was Don, or father, as Don means, as you'll hear in a little bit. He was born in Naples, Italy in 1882 and died there in 1970. So that actually not pretty much recently. A priest, mystic, and victim soul, he endured numerous sufferings and trials throughout his life, embracing them with extraordinary faith and growing steadily in holiness. He received many spiritual locations from Jesus and the Blessed Virgin Mary. Among these heavenly gifts was the Surrender Novena prayer, a prayer that has since brought comfort and trust in God's providence and to countless souls around the world. And we're going to talk about this book with Maria Palma Smith. She is a wife, mother, grandmother, and Thorn Order Franciscan. She is also a writer, translator, and a Catholic life coach, holding a master's degree from Holy Apostles College and Seminary. Born in southern Italy, Maria immigrated to the United States with her family and later spent several years living in Italy, where she worked as a translator and English teacher. In addition to translating Don Dolindo's biography, Jesus, I Surrender Myself to You, Maria has translated his autobiography and the fourth volume of his commentaries on the Psalms. So without further ado, let's welcome to the show, get the book out here, to Maria Palmer Smith. So Maria, thank you again for coming on the show today. And like I mentioned right before we hopped on, this really got me excited, and I'm sure a lot of people are anxious to hear the story about Don the bingo.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for having me on. Yes. And as you said, Father Dolindo was born in 1882 and he died in 1970. And throughout most of his life, he lived in Naples, Italy, and except for a very few years. And then sometimes he would go to Rome. But otherwise, he was in Naples, Italy for most of his life. And he was very well known by Saint Padre Pio, and he knew Saint Padre Pio well because everybody did at the time. But Saint Padre Pio had a very high esteem for Father Dolindo. Now, Father Dolindo was in Naples most of his life, and Saint Padre Pio was on the other side of Italy, on the other coast, at San Giovanni Rotondo. And when pilgrims would go from Naples to meet with Saint Padre Pio, he would say to them, "Why do you come all the way here to me when you have your own saint in Naples, Don Dolindo?"
That's quite the compliment right there. I mean, smart Padre Pio saying that to you about you. That's definitely a compliment. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, he didn't know it applied maybe back then, but yeah, that's quite a huge compliment. So
yeah.
I mean, what's just more of the backstory of Don Dolindo? Just kind of the backstory of his life and his life up until when Jesus and Mary appeared to him.
Yeah. So Father Dolindo had a life that really was filled with much suffering ever since he was really a tiny child, because he had some operations when he was very little, when he was about a year old. And then his family life, his mother was very caring, but his father was extremely severe to him, most of all, but also to the other children. There were 11 children that were born. 3 died young. And so Father Dolindo, he was the second boy. He had an older brother. And the father was very severe with them. Whenever they did anything that the father perceived as wrong, they would get severely beat. And so it was very difficult. And also the father was very miserly. He would not give money for clothes or for shoes for the children. And it was very difficult. It was very strained for the marriage as well. And this is also really important too, because people, especially nowadays, there's a lot of difficult relationships and broken families. And yet loving our Lord and Our Lady really can help us overcome anything. And so Father Dolindo really shows this too. And his mother was very prayerful. His father too was a Catholic, but still there were very many difficulties. And when Father Dolindo was 13 years old, his parents actually separated. In Italy, there was no divorce, and I do not think the mother would want a divorce anyway. She just had to separate because he was making life very, very hard for the children. So she took the children and went to stay with her brother. But then years later, when the father was sick, she took him in and she nursed him and she took care of him. So they loved each other. She loved Don Dolindo's father, but they just could not live together because of the severity of the problems. So when she separated from him, she sent Dolindo and his older brother Elio to a boarding school, to a minor seminary. And Father Dolindo had much difficulty in school. He actually flunked 3 years in a row. He just could not get it. He was okay with memorizing things, but he had no idea what he was memorizing or how to put the knowledge together. He would just like rattle it off and then, well, what does this mean? He had no idea. So he flunked 3 years in a row. So it'd be like saying 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. When he went to the minor seminary, after he was there for a few weeks. So it's a minor seminary. The whole class is praying the rosary. They're kneeling down and praying the rosary. And above Father Dolindo is a holy card of the Blessed Virgin Mary holding the child Jesus. And underneath it says, La Madonna della Sapienza, Our Lady of Wisdom. So he's praying the rosary and he prays to Our Lady. He says, Dear Mother Mary, if you want me to become a priest, you have to give me intelligence because you know how stupid I am. Now, as he's recounting this episode decades later, when he's an adult, he says that I don't know what happened. Maybe it was a breeze, maybe something, but the holy card fell down from the shelf where it was in front of some books, and it hit me on the forehead, kind of dazed me a little. And when I lifted my head, all of a sudden, I could expound on all things, philosophy, philosophical terms that I had never studied before. And he received infused knowledge, so much so that his classmates called him the encyclopedia.
Wow. I mean, that's transformation. And then just having that knowledge of exactly that power in prayer and the faith in prayer. Because that's, I mean, like you said, I mean, just, well, I mean, how honest his prayer was, and it was pretty simple and honest, but he still gave himself to Mary, like saying, "Here, take me," wow,
yeah,
that's quite incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened to other holy people as well.
Right.
And so it happened to him, and he said that really he only had intelligence for things that were of God.
Right. I mean, the only thing that, and like you said, there's other people. I mean, the first thing that brought to to my mind was the apostles of Pentecost. I mean, that was the only, but that was visible. He just like looked up and he's like, oh, now I know all this. So that's truly quite amazing with that. So you're talking about what Padre Pio was talking about him and what people were asking. Like he's like, no, go, you got your own say over there. Go to him. First of all, Maria, if you could just explain to the audience what does Padre mean and what does Don mean in the terms, and then what was the relationship between those two holy men.
Okay, so Saint Padre Pio was always called Padre Pio during his lifetime because he was part of a religious order, the Franciscans, the branch of the Capuchins. So anybody in Italy any priest who's part of a religious order is always called Padre, whether it's Carmelite, Dominican, Franciscan. However, if they are diocesan priests, they're called Don, D-O-N, Don Dolindo. And this is similar also to Saint John Bosco, who's also known as Don Bosco, because he was a diocesan priest. And this was for many, many centuries, and it has kept on. In past centuries in Italy and also in Spain, the term Don meant a sign of respect. As in Spanish, there would be Don Juan or Don Quixote. That would be just a sign a knight was called, or nobility. The people who were part of the nobility were called Don. But now it's only retained for the priesthood. So Don, and if you go to Italy, anybody who's called Don, it could be Don Vincenzo, it's a diocesan priest. If they say Padre Angelo, Padre Bernardo, that would be somebody in a religious order. So that's how they differentiate.
So, like you mentioned that before we came on, and I'm like, that's really cool. I wish to start calling my diocesan priest that. I wonder what they would say to that, but at least you could probably say them and they're like, oh, you know that, and you're like, yes, I do. But that's different country, and that's how they do it, and that's really, really cool because you're like, that's a lot of dons, but
yes,
and that's why.
Yeah, exactly. They're all called that. So even if you go on YouTube and you see an Italian video with a priest, it's going to be either Don or Padre.
Gotcha. Okay, I will notice that from now on now. So, but yeah, let's say it's kind of going back to the let's say Padre Pio and Dolindo, just the relationship between those two men. And if I may add this to Maria, is like you asked me before we came on too, like, have I ever heard of them before? I'm like, no, I've heard the prayer before, but never heard of Don Dolindo before. So why is Padre Pio more famous than Don Dolindo?
That's a great question. And I thought about that a lot. And I really think it's because it was Padre Pio's time in the 20th century. And I really do believe that it's going to be, that it is, and it will be Don Dolindo's time in the 21st century. Now, the gifts that Padre Pio was given, the stigmata, the gifts of prophecy, of confession, and really Padre Pio also had a much more extroverted and strong personality. So he was really, people would go to him and he would talk to them and he would tell them, and even in confession, you haven't given me a good confession, go. And he would be very strong and very forceful that way. That was his personality, and that was for his time. And he was very, very well known right in his lifetime. Don Dolindo was not as well known. He wasn't well known by some people, but nowhere near as much as Saint Padre Pio. Now, actually, I have to get back to what happened to Don Dolindo, because why it's important that. So what happened is, for a period of almost 20 years, Don Dolindo was forbidden to celebrate Mass, all on false accusations, misunderstandings, etc., which I can get into. And the reason that was allowed, that God permitted that, wanted that for Don Dolindo, is that it gave him a lot of time to write. And he wrote a lot of things. He wrote his autobiography, his confessor, Under Obedience to His Confessor. But he also wrote, which I think very few people know, a 33-volume commentary on every book of sacred scripture for the laity.
Wow. Did not know that.
Yeah. And it has not been translated into English yet. And so when he wrote it, a lot of people really liked it. And actually it helped with conversions of some people too in Italy. It helped the conversion of some people when he wrote these in Italian. And so the reason I believe that he was not as well known, or is not as well known now, is because his time is coming now with the internet and with the rise of so many people who want to become Catholic, but knowledgeable Catholics. Because up until 20, 30 years ago, up until recently, the vast majority of Catholics did not really understand their faith well.
That's true.
They really did. Yes. And, you can ask people who were born in the early to mid 1900s. They're like, well, we do it because that's what we were told. We went to school and we learned that we're supposed to do this, but they cannot give you good reasoning. They could not tell you why this is right and why that's not right, why some things have changed, why others haven't. So now that they're with the internet, and with especially more young people who really want to understand the Catholic faith, it is really time for Father Dolindo. And how did he get well known? By the Surrender Novena, which is really for everybody of any level. Anybody can pray that, and it really means a lot to so many people. And with that prayer too, and with his biography and his autobiography, he is very similar, I believe, that you can really put him together with Saint Therese, Story of a Soul, and Saint Faustina. With Saint Therese, it's all about love of God. And with Saint Faustina, it's the trust. I believe the Surrender Novena is like the manual for Saint Faustina's trust. How do you Jesus, I trust in you, but how exactly? So the Surrender Novena comes and says, do not worry. Do not be anxious. Leave all your cares to me. That's how you trust. And it goes on and on. Don't do that. Do this. Be like a child, asleep in its mother's arms. So it's really the manual to how do I trust, instead of saying, I trust in you, but this is how you do it.
Right. Because I think that's a lot of people get messed up. I mean, a lot of people say that, I trust in you, but like you said, what does that look like? How can you?
Yes.
And maybe you pray that in church and you walk out and you're like, what do I even mean by that though? How can I see how can I see how to trust God with that? And like you said with with that surrender prayer, it kind of backs it up. And as well, like you said, any age level can pray that. You can have your kindergarten child pray that. I mean, I should say preschool child pray that, or you can be praying it 101 years old on your deathbed praying that. It's for everyone, like you said, and it's short, simple, easy along, and you can say it together as a family every night too. With that being said, and I did like what you mentioned too. It's like, Padre Pio's time was in the 20th century, and now with the internet, and now, there's a lot of other saints, like St. Catholictt, of course, with his stuff with the internet. That's a really good, a really good point, I should say, is that, I think a lot more people's going to get to know him, especially, like you mentioned, he's up there probably with St. Faustina and St. Therese, which a lot of people, whether it's divine mercy or just having a lot of trust in Jesus, those two are huge. So,
yes.
I would have to agree. I would take your word for it because I don't know much about him yet, but I do have to agree so far. Yeah, he is trending upward in the in all the saints searches, I guess, and then he's probably definitely up there for that as well. So, like you mentioned, you can talk a little bit more about why didn't he celebrate Mass for 20 years? Because, people have heard about priests, or bishops, getting removed and can't celebrate Mass for whatever various reasons. But for 20 years, that's quite a long time.
Yes. Now, St. Padre Pio also was forbidden to celebrate Mass for a period of maybe 2 or 3 years, for a much shorter period, because they did not believe the stigmata, they did not believe all that was going on. So they had to investigate that. And St. Padre Pio was very obedient to that, as was Don Dolindo. Now, what happened was when he was ordained a priest, and I didn't mention this fact, but he was actually, because he went to the minor seminary, he was actually part of a religious order briefly. He was ordained in the religious order. So actually, you could call him also Padre Dolindo, because he was part of a religious order. The missionary priest, the apostolic school of missionary priests is where he went. However, when there was some difficulty and controversies, they expelled him. So he was only briefly part of the religious order, and then he became a diocesan priest for the rest of his life. And he also became a third order Franciscan, which he was very, very happy to do.
Well, busy guy, that's for sure.
Yeah. So now what happened was this. His first assignment was in Puglia, on the other side of Italy, on the East Coast. So he went there with his superior. He's been just ordained just recently. He went there with his superior. His superior had a spiritual daughter, a spiritual directee. And Father Dolindo also spoke with her, but just spoke with her. He was not this woman's spiritual director. And this woman's name was Serafina. Now, Serafina had visions, locutions, she had prophecies, all this, and she was pretty well known all over Italy. So they investigated the spiritual director, whose name was Padre Volpe, and they investigated Don Dolindo. They asked him about this woman. Well, he said the truth. He had spoken to her, and she seemed fine and sincere of faith and all this. And so he would not say that she was suffering under delusions and things like that. That's what they were trying to make him say. And he said, as far as I can see, again, he was not the spiritual director. He was just stating exactly what was the facts. And yet they did not like that. They did not like what was going on with this woman. So because of this woman, both he and his superior were involved in this. Both he and his superior were forbidden to celebrate Mass for only a period of 36 days. Then they were reinstated. But this whole situation put Father Dolindo under the microscope. Anything and everything he did was analyzed and criticized and all this. So that's where it started. And then there were other things going on. And then he was falsely accused of, well, he started to write this whole thing about the priesthood. That's what he thought he was writing. It came out to be that he was writing about women's role in the church. And it's really very, very beautiful. He puts women's role. Now, this was at the time of 1910s, 20s, and all this. And really, women did not have much of a role in the church, up until Vatican II, up until more modern times. And so this is one of the things that they got on him, because they're thinking, oh, he's thinking about this. He was accused of wanting to ordain women. Never, ever would he want that. He was accused of many, many false things. That was one of them. So he got a group around him, and it was mostly women. It was not totally women. It was a lot of women, and it was families. And so he really saw the woman as a person who's helping the priest. He put it this way, like the woman gathers the flowers and brings them. The souls of people are the flowers. Or the woman is like a nurse who takes care of the soul and brings it to the doctor or to the priest. So the woman is always helping the priest, but not taking the part of the priest. And actually, if we look at Our Lady, that's exactly what she did with Jesus. That's what she did with the apostles. She was there helping them. And that's what other women too in the Bible with Jesus, he really raised womanhood. I mean, he complimented them, he praised them. The Samaritan woman, the Canaanite woman, he praised her faith. And Martha and Mary, he praised Mary, who's just listening to him. He praised her for being receptive to his word. So he's praising all these women. So Jesus himself raised womanhood way higher than the Jewish faith had, which was already much higher than the pagans. The pagans really treated their women terribly. And the Jews had laws that they had to give a bill of divorce. They had to treat their women with some justice and dignity. And Jesus raised the bar even higher. And with Our Lady, it really puts where a woman was supposed to be, equal to man in dignity. And it has not really been throughout really all of human history. It really hasn't been. The only faith that really comes very close is the Catholic faith. with Our Lady. When you don't have when a person of religion doesn't have a great devotion to Our Lady, already womanhood can only be second class, if not third class. You just can't. If Our Lady is not that important, and she certainly was to our Lord, she certainly was to the apostles. They looked up to her. And then when St. John took her in, he looked up to her. They all looked up to her. That's how important she was. These apostles, the first priests, the first ones that followed Jesus, the ones that from the apostolic succession is the apostles, and they looked up to Our Lady, to a woman. So if they can, why shouldn't all of us?
Right. No, definitely. I really like that. And like you mentioned earlier with his amazing infusion testimony, that's exactly what he did. He looked up and prayed to her, and she had to see him, and bang, lots of great knowledge, that's for sure. So, which is like, I mean, you hear that again and again, going back to why you couldn't celebrate the Mass, is just all these false accusations, all that, which like, I thought of that too, right when you said the music, because it was way before Second Vatican Council. So, I mean, because like I said, a lot of women, I mean, they weren't altar souls, they weren't really much anything. So that is totally true. Like, where do women fit in? When do they fit in? And so that is definitely true on that part as well. So what did he do when he couldn't hear? What did he do when he couldn't hear confessions or say the Mass? Like, what could he do?
Well, what he did do was he had recourse to the Holy Office, which is no longer what the Catholic Church calls it. They call it the dicastery. I forget the actual term, what it's called now. But he would go there and plead his case and talk to people and see what was being done. They'd say, really, just like in many courts, it's not time yet, we're going to have another meeting. He would be under interrogation. They also had him undergo 2 psychological exams to make sure he was of sound mind. So all these things, and they kept putting him off, and they kept finding different things. Different people, even people within the church. And this is really another reason why I think that his story is so important for our times right now, especially with the internet, especially with people talking about all things Catholic, especially in America. I think we're the ones who do it probably the most. You're like, everything anybody does, we have an opinion, and we have an opinion on what somebody said about what somebody else did, and over and over. Yeah. And with Father Dolindo, really, he was not treated well by members of the church. So, I mean, this is ongoing. This has been ongoing throughout the whole history of the church for 2,000 years. There are people in the church, and even with people who are saintly, well, even with St. Thomas Aquinas, because the dogma of the Immaculate Conception was not yet there, he actually didn't think that Our Lady was immaculately conceived. The Franciscans did, the Dominicans didn't. So it's okay to have these discussions and things like that. It's all right. It's just not all right to say you're wrong. It's like, this is my opinion, why I think this, and that's good. Discussion, debate, things like that, but not to criticize and say the other people are heretics or this and that. I mean, really, it's not for us to say that. And of course, so anyway, with Father Dolindo, there were people in the church who misunderstood or falsely accused for whatever reasons, many different reasons. Maybe it could even have been jealousy. Maybe it could have been, who knows. But at one point, somebody went to the Holy Father in Rome and was condemning Father Dolindo, who was celebrating Mass right then. He's in the middle of a homily. Now, he's in the middle of a homily. This is in Naples. And this is way before text and stuff. So he had no idea what was going on in Rome. Okay. And they didn't know what was going on in Naples. So it was a priest who went to speak to the Holy Father and saying that, Father Dolindo's been accused of this and that and all this stuff. So the Holy Father stops, says that he will no longer be able to preach because we have to find out if these accusations are true or not. As Father Dolindo is celebrating Mass and saying the homily, he stops in the middle of the homily. at the exact moment that the Holy Father is forbidden him to preach. This is how connected his soul was and how sensitive he was, that, and really it's really miraculous that at that moment he could no longer continue the homily. That very moment. And actually that was people, interrogated about him about that. And one of his spiritual daughters who was there at Mass and who was also a physician, this woman was a physician. She said he was perfectly healthy. There was absolutely no reason for him not to be able to find his words and not to be able to continue. He finished celebrating the Mass, but for the homily he said, I can't talk anymore. That's what he said. And he stopped the homily.
What a shock.
Yeah.
Just at least.
Yeah.
Like you said, that was way before text, way before anything. So only 4 walks in and you're done. I'm like, okay, let me just finish up real quick and I'll be right with you. That's definitely strange.
Yes.
So, wow. That's never heard that one before. Never. I wonder how a priest would react today if that would happen. I guess, how would they?
Yeah. What happens is everybody says, "Oh my goodness, that's so unfair. That's so unjust." And
That's
yes, it is unfair and it is unjust. But again, following Saint Padre Pio's example, it was unjust for him too. And following Don Dolindo's example, they were obedient. And look what happened with St. Padre Pio. He's a canonized saint. He's more loved now than ever before. And with Father Dolindo, he did so much in his lifetime. He helped the conversion of so many people during his lifetime. And I really think he's helping so many people right now.
No, I like that's definitely true. And I think more people get to know about him, he will help many more out that way too. We've seen many more miraculous things happen. So I know, Maria, I said this since the start. And I know the audience is really like, when he's going to get to this question. So I'm going to ask this question now: is how did Father Don Dolindo receive the Jesus, I surrender myself to you novena? How did that story come about on a prayer?
Well, the Surrender Novena was originally just a prayer that Don Dolindo received from Jesus as he's writing to his spiritual daughter. Father Dolindo's writing to his spiritual daughter, and he's using the words that Jesus is giving to him for his spiritual daughter. So he's telling his spiritual daughter, do not be anxious, do not be afraid, leave all your cares to me, rest in me, and all this. So he's saying this whole thing because the woman was very anxious about what was going on in her life. So that's what it was. It was a full prayer. Father Dolindo never received it as a novena. And really to this day, I have not been able to find, nor has anybody been able to tell me who turned it into a novena. When, where, what language was it first turned into a novena? It was the long prayer. And somebody took it and separated it into 9 parts and then added to each part, Jesus, I surrender myself to you. Take care of everything. There's also an alternate one, which is also beautiful. Jesus, you take over. And people can also say, Jesus, take care of this situation. Because in Italian, the words really take all that into consideration. It's very short in Italian. Gesù, Jesus, pensaci tu. Pensaci tu, translated literally, means you think about it. Pensa, pensare means to think, pensive, where we get the word pensive. So pensare, pensaci tu, you think about it. You think about this, or you think about this situation, or you take care of it, or you take care of everything. Because in Italian, it really means like when you're telling somebody, okay, I have the situation, we have to get all these things done. Okay, you think about it. You pensaci tu. It's all on you. It's like saying, I'm giving it all to you. Here's all the stuff. I'm giving it to you. Here's all the things that you need to know about. You take care of it. So it's really beautiful. Pensaci tu. It really encompasses all of that.
Wow. So you got it as a prayer, writing it to the spiritual daughter. But do we have any guesses of who? Like I said, there's no one can tell. But no. Do we have any close guesses who
I have a guess. I think it's the guardian angels of every country, because it's been, and there's
Sure.
a Spanish version, Polish version, Italian. It's all over. It's really all over. It's growing and growing in popularity, and so I think that's what it is. It was just its time. Maybe someday we'll find out like which person. That would be great if somebody's listening now and somebody knows who did it. I don't know, but it was 1940 when it first came out. And I don't know when it first came out in English. When's the very first that it came out in English? There's many YouTube videos in many different languages. There's more than one in English, more than one in Italian that you can find with the Surrender Novena. And in Italian, it's called L'atto di abbandono, the act of abandonment. So abandonment or surrender, which is really what we see in a lot of religious books, even older books, abandonment to divine providence, trustful surrender. All these are just really the same term. Really, as human beings, we need to be told the same thing over and over again in different ways and in the same way all the time, because everything really in the Surrender Novena, in Divine Mercy with Saint Faustina, it's really already in the Bible. And it was already even in the Old Testament. I mean, with Proverbs, place all your trust in me. Do not rely on your own intelligence. That's the Surrender Novena. Don't think you're going to handle everything on your own. Don't try to do it all on your own. Do not trust on your own intelligence. Trust in me. Trust in God. So it's really there. It's like, but as human beings, we're always like, oh, this is and then something speaks to us in a different way. Father Dolindo's words speak to us, or Saint Faustina's diary, which is so beautiful, speaks to us, or Saint Therese, or any of the other saints, Saint Carlo Acutis. I mean, we see this young boy dressed in jeans and like, we're like, oh my goodness, and he was so holy. And again, too, his parents were not even churchgoers. They were the very common Italians, which is, well, yeah, we'll get married in church, we'll have the child baptized, but that's about it. That's the very cultural Italian. And so here he is. And this is really God's work, with Carlo Acutis. God, the Holy Spirit, put this great love for religion and for God into this little boy. And he was the one who's bringing his mother to church. And I've actually heard this even with people that I know. It's the children sometimes that say, I want to go to church. Take me to church,
Oh yeah, I've heard that one time. Someone I know, and I think it was, one of them was like, I want to go to church, and I was like, okay, like what can you say? You can't say no to a kid who wants to go to church, and so yeah, absolutely. So is there? Because every time I'm playing about Saint Padre Pio, I'm playing about Saint Don Dolindo, but it's not Saint Don Dolindo yet.
No.
So is there a case out for his canonization? Where is that in the process?
There was a postulator for his case, a Franciscan friar. Unfortunately, that Franciscan friar passed away about 10 years ago, and it has not been reopened again. So anybody who's listening, pray that it will be reopened again. I really think it will, especially as his biography and hopefully soon his autobiography are published, and when his writings, his commentaries start being published, translated and published into English. I really think that so many more people are going to get to know and love Father Dolindo and really appreciate his wisdom and his virtue. And really his wisdom came from his virtue. And his virtue was loyalty and long-sufferingness and patience and love of Jesus. And he had a great love for Our Lady. So really, that's what it is. It's the great love for Jesus, especially in the Holy Eucharist, and a great love for Our Lady. That really is what makes saints.
Like Jesus said, you can't love Mary as much as I did. So don't feel bad about that. So
yeah.
So like, I mean, there's in a CC, people can go see St. Carlo Acutis' body and his casket there. They can go to Lourdes. They can go to all these different places. Is there a place, Maria, that people can go and venerate Don Dolindo?
Absolutely, yes. In Naples, in the church where he was a priest for much of his life. And actually, his older brother, the one that went to minor seminary with him, Elio, that I mentioned before, I believe, he also was a priest in the same church. And his older brother, was the pastor, and Don Dolindo was there as an assistant or whatever. So they were both priests in the same church in Naples. And Father Dolindo's tomb is in this church. And actually, before Father Dolindo died, he told people that when I'm dead, come to my tomb and knock at my tomb and make any request that you want. If I can, you will get the request. And if not, I will come to you in a dream and tell you why you could not receive what you requested.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like a promise that it's going to be kept. So
Yes.
definitely get to Naples for sure. Wow. So I guess with just a couple of questions left, Malia, with that being said, I mean, like I said, people should make that on the bucket list, especially if you're going over to that way, that area of the world. What lessons can we draw from Don Dolingo's life? What disciplines, what virtues can we gain from his life?
Yeah. Really, the virtue of obedience, obedience to Holy Mother Church, the virtue of loyalty and fidelity. And really, it is for priests. But when I was doing the translating of his biography and autobiography, really what I saw, William, was this, that with his loyalty to the church, it really reflects for priests, for religious, and for married couples. Because right now, that's what's really is very broken in our world. I mean, the priesthood, the religious life, and marriage. And so even with marriage, it's really being faithful, even if the marriage is very difficult. Because Father Dolindo's priesthood was very difficult, extremely difficult. He was falsely accused. He was not allowed to celebrate Mass. For the longest period, I told you the first period was only 36 days. Then there was a year. Then there was something else. And then the longest period was 16 years. And then when he was finally reinstated after those 16 years, he was so overcome with joy. Now, this is in southern Italy, Naples and all this. And this is in the mid 20th century, and these are Italians, so everybody's overjoyed, and everybody's crying, and all these other religious are crying. They're like, because 16 years, it was like, oh my goodness, so wonderful. So this is what we can learn from him, his virtues, and they really loyalty, obedience, long-sufferingness, which is something that, especially in modern culture, and maybe most of all in America, we don't want to wait for things. We don't want to long suffer. We don't even want to suffer a little bit. I mean, I'm guilty of this myself. It's like, it's very hard when you're raised in a certain culture. If you're raised in a culture where really, you know that life is going to be a suffering. And for many centuries, it really was. I mean, even in the 20th century, and especially in the 19th century, when people were born and were growing up, they didn't think, oh, I'm going to have an easy life, a comfortable life. I'm going to have fun. They thought life was pretty hard. And so actually, that's something too about becoming a religious was easier, because being a religious is hard, but life was pretty hard too. I mean, life was very, like I remember one nun was saying to me, like, some of the girls that would go there didn't even know how to sweep. They didn't know how to do the very basic things. And like, when you can't do very basic little tasks, or when you can't give up little things, like you're not used to, I mean, in the olden days, what kind of food did you have? Basically the same kind of food. You didn't have all these restaurants to go to. You didn't have all this entertainment to go to. So basically you're living the same life in your home as you're going to live in a convent, except that you don't get married and have children. But, in the home, you're doing the chores. It's basically really just very much a life that's very much just work, mostly work. You go to Mass, you see your family, but there's not like you're going here, you're going there, this entertainment, this different kind of restaurant. If the crops aren't good, you're not going to have much food that year. So it was not a big stretch to go. And also there were other factors as well, such as a woman could not live alone by herself, or even with a roommate, they would have to. So that's another reason that they might go into the convent, because they did not want to get married, or because they really loved God. Whatever, there's many different reasons, but it was not as difficult to go. In our modern times, it really is a huge step. But I also believe that the Holy Spirit gives the graces to be able to do such a huge step, because now most women are accomplished. They go to school, they can have their careers. So for somebody, they have their career already, they're a doctor, a lawyer, whatever they are. And then to go and become a nun is really giving up so much. Whereas before, I'm either going to get married. Saint Teresa of Avila, she wanted to become a nun because she didn't want to get married.
Right.
So that,
Exactly.
and actually for the first 20 years or so, she wasn't even a very good nun, because nuns at that time, they were allowed to talk to people, and she was very extroverted and very charming. So lots of people would go to her, and because there were so many nuns there, also because if you don't get married, you usually become a nun. There were so many nuns that the Mother Superior said, if anybody wants to bring you, to their house for dinner, please go, because we don't have enough food. So Saint Teresa was always being invited, and so she was almost 40 before she had the major conversion and really started to reform the Carmelite order. But anyway, so it was not a big step. It was like she was living basically the same way in her house. She was cooking, she was cleaning. She goes to the convent. She's doing very similar things. She's praying more. But even then, in those days, families prayed a lot more than they do nowadays. They went, it was really, life revolved around the church and family. That's it.
Right. No, well points, well said, Maria. Because I think today, and especially in America, we call that the grind, right? It's kind of like, we'll grind through this work, we'll grind through that work, we'll grind through my prayer life day, we'll grind through this, and then, it's the weekend, I can kind of do whatever I want. I want to go to this entertainment, I want to go to that, and not really. We don't really have that patience and do it, so we want to have like a delayed gratification.
Yeah.
And basically, people would say, like, we have left. We have 40 days to do these things, and then we get our normal lives back. It's like you said, it's like, basically that's how life should be, and life is anyway. Just because you're doing all these types of different things that, and I think especially if you're a young couple and you're just moving out of the house, that's probably when real life really happens. And you really feel the sense of fear that you need to have God, that you need to trust in God, to whatever He has next for you. Because when you're retirement, you're probably more like, well, you're thankful that you made it to be 65 or 70, but you're more like, well, I'm gonna kick back, relax, and do whatever I want, and yeah. So like you said, life was different back then, and the society has gone to that culture of, like, I'm a victim. I'm the same way, Marie. I don't like suffering either. It's just getting a nail in my foot. It's just, I'm complaining about it. I'm like, it's not that bad. It hurts, whatever. Let's just move on and offer up. Let's just move on. So definitely something that we can learn from for sure. And so, last question I want to ask you about the book. What is your favorite part in it, and like, what do you hope that people get out of the book when they sit down to read it?
That's a hard question, because I really like a lot of parts of it. My favorite part really of translating it was really getting to know Father Dolindo, getting to know his personality, getting to understand, like, when I read this in Italian, I know what he means by it, so I can more easily translate it. Because at first it was more difficult. I had to really get to know him. So really getting to know him as a person, and really feeling like he's a family member, my brother or my uncle, really feeling like he's somebody that I've known all my life. I know what he would say. I know how he would react in certain things. And I know how much he suffered. I know how much, if it's not like, with saints, they suffer a lot. It's not like, it's nothing. No, the suffering is absolutely real. And he suffered so much from the false accusations, from not being able to celebrate Mass. And he would go to Jesus. So really the Surrender Novena, which he did write to one of his spiritual daughters, is so much for him. He lived the Surrender Novena. He lived that. And he also wrote something that was really beautiful, that very similar to the Surrender Novena. He would say, this was very difficult, and I love you still. He's saying this to Jesus, because it's like, this happened to me today, and I love you still. This went wrong, and I love you still. This went wrong, and I trust you still. So it's really that trust, that love. And one thing I wanted to say too about what we can learn from Father Dolindo, as well as Saint Therese of Lisieux and Mother Teresa of Calcutta, it is the little things done with great love. And this is also Father Dolindo. He would do little things with great love, and God gave him the capacity to do greater things. But it was the little things and the humility. And when he was falsely accused, he ran to Jesus. He didn't run to the newspaper or to a YouTuber and say, look, how they're treating me terrible. He ran to Jesus and he poured his heart out to Jesus. He also did speak to confessors, and he would go to confession and pour his heart out, or to a spiritual director. But that's it. And then he obeyed them. And oftentimes they would also comfort him and say, really, God is putting you through this for a greater good, which gave him much comfort. It's like, I didn't do anything wrong. Nothing's, because, even Father Dolindo, he was very human, and when he went to visit St. Padre Pio, he really, he prayed that St. Padre Pio would give him some assurance that the road he was on was the right road. Because even though he was doing all these wonderful things, he's writing these books, he's doing great things, he's suffering very patiently, still you have that doubt. Am I doing the right thing? And so Padre Pio said to him, all of heaven is in your soul.
That is true.
Yes. And that really gave him such comfort. He really did know that he was on the right path. But that is sure, like when we know we're doing something right, but somebody says to us, or somebody we respect and admire, a priest or whoever it is, says, oh, that is really good what you're doing. We feel like, okay, yes, it's a sign from God that, I'm not just deluding myself that I'm doing the right thing.
Right. No, well said. Because I think about that a lot, and I've had that happen to me, and other people have as well. So that is 100% true. Maria, I am very interested in helping get the canonization for him back up and going, or getting the word out. So if you could send me some more info on them, I'll post it to the website, and I'll have a separate page to him on the website, if that would be okay.
Yes. I haven't looked at it in a while yet, but there was a place online where people could sign a petition for his canonization. Okay. I'll check on that and I'll send it to you.
Sounds good. I would really appreciate that. And I would, again, encourage everyone to, maybe have them, I would encourage everyone to put them in your prayers, on your interceding list, I should say. And if you can make it Naples, great. Otherwise, just like what we were just talking about, this happened, but I still love you. I think that would be a great end of the day prayer if you put all your conscience as well. So, even though, like you said, you're like, I kind of did this wrong, Lord, and I did that wrong, and I didn't like how you did that in my life, but I still love you. Even though it probably would be hard most of the time, I would think, because we're all human. But do that, and listen, here's the book again, one last time. You can get on Tam Books. We'll have the link down in the description box for your easy access. And Maria, I really thank you for your time and your commitment to this. And I hope to have you back on the show again real soon.
Oh, sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. God bless you.
God bless you, Maria. Thank you. We'll see you next time, everyone. Stay in the same grace, go to the sacraments, and God willing, we'll see you same time, same place next week on Catholic Table Talk.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Catholic Table Talk podcast, where everything Catholic is on the table. Don't forget to subscribe to Catholic Table Talk on your favorite podcast platform to get new episodes delivered directly to you every Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern.